How's it going, everyone? My name is Jakejames Lugo, and welcome to the channel, where you'll find some of the most fair and honest game reviews out here.
Hello there.
And welcome to my ultimate tier list for Star Wars games on PlayStation consoles. We're talking every single Star Wars game that's ever been on a PlayStation platform. Everything from PlayStation 1 all the way through to PlayStation 5, including PlayStation Portable, and heck, we even threw in PlayStation Vita into there, even though there's not a whole lot going on with it, but still, we're talking everything when it comes to PlayStation and Star Wars games.
Impressive. Most impressive.
Trust me, this is going to be a really big, fun, and interesting discussion that I hope you guys will really enjoy. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Leave a like on this video. Subscribe to the channel if you can. Show some love if you're a big Star Wars fan or just a big gamer. Speaking of which, we're going through every single Star Wars game that's been on every single PlayStation platform. So literally everything. As you could see here that I got right in front of everybody, I have every single game, all their box arts, from all the way spanning from PS1, PS2, PS3, PS4, PS5, and PlayStation Portable. Now, there are a few exceptions, and why I'm not really including PlayStation Vita is because there wasn't a whole lot of Star Wars games on there, and I'm talking real Star Wars games.
What?
We're talking some of the best that are out here, and some of the worst of the worst. I'm talking about Star Wars games that are true Star Wars games. I don't mean anything like Angry Birds Star Wars or Star Wars Pinball. No, none of that. The only exception to this, because it gets included because of Legacy, is Lego Star Wars. That's the rules for this ultimate tier list. So if you're a big fan of those games, you're going to probably play them regardless. There isn't a whole lot of people out there that love those games as much as some of these other classic Star Wars games, or newer Star Wars games that whatever have you.
A surprise, to be sure, but a welcome one.
But regardless, though, we're going to go through it console by console, platform by platform, every single Star Wars game. So let's get started, because we got a big discussion. We're going to go through literally every game and get into detail about why I feel like certain games should be placed in certain parts of the tier list. We got S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, D tier, and of course, the trash tier, which is the absolute garbage, the absolute trash of the trash, the worst of the worst. So let's start off with PlayStation 1, okay? We got 6 games in PlayStation 1. And don't worry, if you're looking for a specific platform, there'll be timestamps down below in the comment section, or in the description, I should say, for you guys to check it out so you could jump between the different places here throughout this tier list. So again, it's going to be a long conversation, so bear with me. First game on PlayStation 1, we're going to start off with Star Wars Dark Forces. Okay, I have it here, moving it around. Star Wars Dark Forces is pretty much the first game to star Kyle Katarn, and really the start of the Jedi Knight series. It was originally also on PC, but they had a PlayStation version that had extra levels and exclusive stuff for it. Overall, the game is pretty much a Doom clone, just with a Star Wars motif, which is not bad at all. It's actually pretty decent, but where does it belong on the tier list? Is it a good enough game to be included on the highest of the high or the lowest of the low? So, personally for me, I've played this game many times over the years on multiple platforms between PS1 and also PC. I have to say that the game is pretty good. By today's standards, it's kind of flawed. It hasn't really aged all that well, even for a Doom clone or a Doom-like game. It's just that the aiming on it could be a little bit a little bit stiff, a little bit stingy. I think that the difficulty as far as how fun and challenging it can be could be a little bit hit or miss depending on what type of gamer you are. It'll still appeal to everybody because it is Star Wars, but Dark Forces, I'm definitely going to give it a B tier. We're going to start off strong here and give it a nice B tier because there are technical problems. It's considered Legends material. Most of these games are considered Legends, I should say. But with Dark Forces I feel like it's still pretty good, but flawed, and it has a good legacy. It's fun to go back to, but understand this is a game all the way back from 1990, 1995, 1996, or around there. It's pretty early on. Again, it was on PC first, and then it went to the PlayStation. So we're going to keep it at B tier. Next game, Star Wars Demolition. Now, I've reviewed this game, okay? Straight up, if you haven't seen my review of Star Wars Demolition for the PS1, go check it out on the channel after you check out this video, for the record. But still, Star Wars Demolition, I feel like it's a game with it that's an interesting in concept, but very poor in the execution. There's a lot of problems technical-wise with this game. So it's definitely not getting in the top 3 tiers here. So is it absolute trash or is it okay? I will say that if you're someone that loves Twisted Metal, if you're someone that loves Carmageddon, or you love someone that, or you're a person that loves like arena battle games, you're going to dig Star Wars Demolition. The problem with this game is that even though the concept is good, the controls are super stiff. It could be really hard to control your vehicle, no matter what character you play as. You could even play as Boba Fett in here, like riding around in his jetpack, which is pretty awesome. And because this game came out, I believe, in 1998, this was after the release of Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Or, yeah, was it 1998? Yeah, 1998, 1999. This came out around the time, like, Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace was a thing. And you can unlock Darth Maul, which is pretty darn cool, you know, if you go through the game. But the problem is you got to go through the game in order to get all that stuff, which is a big, big problem. And just there's so many issues with it that I find it to be super annoying. I'm going to give it a D tier. We're going to put it right above trash. It's not trash because there is still some fun and still some charm for it. But as far as like the best of the PlayStation era, PlayStation 1 era, I should say, it's not really up there. I don't think it's aged all that well. I think it's kind of bleh.
I have a bad feeling about this.
Moving on, right? Speaking of The Phantom Menace, Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Where does this one fall under? So, if you were a big fan of the movie back then, if you grew up watching the prequel trilogy in theaters, more than likely, you definitely played this game. And pretty much, the story of this game is exactly what you get from the movie, or at least for the most part, as far as what the actual content of it is. Now, you do get to play as other characters, which I think is interesting. You get to play as multiple characters, not just Obi-Wan Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn, which is cool. And of course, you get to see some of the other characters like Anakin, you get to see Padme, you get to see a lot of the Naboo, officers, the Viceroy, Gunray, the battle droids, of course. But is it fun to play? Some people have a lot of nostalgia for this game. Some people really enjoy this game. But personally for me, I think it's kind of mediocre because it hasn't aged all that well technically wise. Again, a lot of these older games, some of their bigger problems are really big detriments to their experience because we're kind of spoiled now with how good games play at this point. And with The Phantom Menace, it's not to the point where it's trash. I don't think it's trash. I think it's a little bit better than Star Wars Demolition, but not as good as Dark Forces. So I'm going to put it in C tier. The reason why I'm putting that Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace in C tier is because I still think you could go through it. You could play through it pretty fine. I think you could enjoy it for what it is, being a product of the time. It has its technical problems as far as loading, as far as controls being stiff and stuff, but a little bit better than Star Wars Demolition, in my personal opinion. As someone who's played all these games, who has had an extensive amount of time playing Star Wars games in general, that's where at least I would put it on the ultimate tier list. So that's where that's going to go. So we got B, C, and D. We're a little bit of everything right now. But let's continue on with more PlayStation 1. So Star Wars Rebel Assault 2. Okay, the Hidden Empire. So this is the second Rebel Assault game. This one was the only one that I know of to come to the PlayStation consoles, because the first Rebel Assault and Rebel Assault 2 were both on PC. The first Rebel Assault, I don't think came to PlayStation consoles, let alone home consoles at all, as far as I know. And I looked around, before I started doing the tier list, I started doing a little bit of research with like Wikipedia and cross-referencing with other places. This is the only Rebel Assault game to come to consoles, as far as I know.
We've entered the Alderaan system.
And does it hold up pretty well? I'm going to be honest with you. This game is definitely very charming with it being a product of the time, but I don't think it's hold up well gameplay-wise. I'm going to put this in D tier. The reason why this goes in D tier is because even with some of its charm with the FMV videos, I think it's really cool that we got like, a story set after the events of Episode 4, A New Hope, but the big problem is that when you try to control this game, much of the difficulty is how difficult it is to control your actual ridicule and actually get precise aim. Even on a PlayStation controller, like even playing this game now, right, on like Steam or something on PC, it could be very difficult just trying to get things right with your aim and trying to like take out some of the different enemies that are coming at you, especially when you have to do it in such a fast pace. One of the big issues with this game, as far as the difficulty, is that you have to take out certain amounts of enemies or certain types of enemies at various points, and if you're not quick enough or if you're not smart enough, you're just going to continuously lose lives, and you could just get a game over pretty darn quickly. Now, for some people, that's totally fine. There's a challenge to it, but on the PlayStation 1 and the way that those controls work and the way that this game has aged, I don't think it works out that well. Again, very nostalgic. A lot of old school Star Wars fans love Rebel Assault 2, and I get it. I'm there with you. I have 2 copies of the damn thing. But the problem is, though, as far as the ultimate tier list, it's not high up on there. It's not trash. We haven't gone to trash yet, but it's still right there, right on the cusp of it. It's the nostalgia factor that does it for me.
I got a bad feeling about this.
So let's continue on with more PlayStation 1. So, Star Wars Jedi Power Battles. Now, I've reviewed this game as well, okay? If you haven't seen my video review of Jedi Power Battles, go look it up on the channel later on after this video. After you watch the Ultimate Tier List, okay? So, where does Jedi Power Battles fall? A lot of people love this game, and I understand it, and I get it. But here's my problem, though, okay? I don't think it's as good as some of the best Star Wars games out there. I think that this game also hasn't aged all that well. I'm going to put it in C tier right next to its counterpart, The Phantom Menace.
How can you do this? This is outrageous. It's unfair.
The reason why is because, number one, Jedi Power Battles is kind of like an offshoot of the Phantom Menace game because it's literally the same types of like locations and places you would get from that first game, or at least, you know, in some ways recycled over into Jedi Power Battles. The only thing that keeps it, that technically I should put it in B tier, but I'm going to keep it in C, and I'll explain in a second. What pushes it up a little bit for me is that you get to play as multiple Jedi. This game came out right before Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. So Mace Windu is in this game. You can play as Mace Windu, but he has a blue lightsaber. We have, play as Qui-Gon, you can play as Obi-Wan, you can play as Plo Koon, who's got a yellow lightsaber, and everybody else. Again, I can't remember the other Jedi's name at the moment, but there's a Jedi in here that's part of the council, that she's part of the prequel trilogy. She has a red lightsaber. This was well before it was established that only the Sith could use red lightsabers, or Dark Jedi could use the red lightsabers, and every other like character in Star Wars, or every other Jedi could use multiple different colors, including blue, green, yellow, etc. Purple eventually what it would be for Mace Windu, but that doesn't happen until Attack of the Clones. So with this game, though, the reason why I put it in C tier is because, again, the controls are stiff. The difficulty spikes, I feel like, are a big problem. I said all this in my video review about it. And while, again, it's fun to play this game with co-op because it makes things a little bit easier, a little bit more manageable, but just being able to deal with some of those controls, being also to deal with the fact that you have to play this game through multiple times with every single character to get all the unlocks. You can unlock Darth Maul in this game to play as him, which is pretty dope, and I think he's the final battle in it as well. But the problem is, though, is that I feel like those controls, those bugs, the hit detection, I think is also a big problem. A lot of people overlook that. When I reviewed the game here on the channel, I felt like the game just had so many instances when I was running through it where like some of my attacks wouldn't hit, or I would have to reposition constantly in order to get like the right angle for my lightsaber to hit. Also, just multiple enemies coming at you, and like some of their shots would hit you from so far and like you'll just take massive damage. It was a little bit annoying. So again, not trash, we're putting it right in the medium section for the PlayStation 1 games.
Take a seat, young Skywalker.
Final PS1 game, and you guys all know this was coming.
I've got a bad feeling about this.
I have a bad feeling about this.
Oh, I have a bad feeling about this.
Star Wars Masters of Terrascasi. Let me tell you people, I reviewed this game also here on the channel. There's a full video review of Masters of Terrascasi that you could go check out later on after this video. This game is horrible. This game is bad. This game is trash. Some people try to defend this game, Masters of Terrascasi. This is the only known official Star Wars fighting game that we've gotten. Now, I say that because this is more of a traditional fighting game. This isn't the same thing like the dual modes that you would get from like Revenge of the Sith or any of the Clone Wars games on the Wii, any of that stuff. This is the like traditional, like official fighting game of a Star Wars, you know, of the Star Wars universe, made by LucasArts, and it was horrible. This is the reason why Star Wars hasn't gone back to the fighting game genre in the way that it did with this. This is automatic trash tier. This game is so bad. It is so terrible. This one of my biggest complaints that I said in my video review. I'm telling you, go watch it when you get a chance later. I said that it really bugged me that you had to play through the toughest difficulty. You had to play through the game on Jedi difficulty with Chewbacca, a specific character, in order, get this, get ready, in order to unlock the level select or the stage select for versus mode.
What?
It's like, come on now. Like, what type of game design is that? Like, what type of choice creatively is that? It is so annoying. Let alone, in order to get any of the unlockables in this game, you have to play through the game on Jedi difficulty, the arcade mode, which is pretty darn difficult because the game suffers from massive bugs, massive collision and detection issues, huge problems with the controls where certain inputs just get, like, dropped outright. The difficulty spikes are ridiculous, especially when you get to Darth Vader, and on Jedi difficulty no less. Even trying to unlock Mara Jade, which I think is kind of a cool thing about this game, because it's expanded universe. This takes place, I want to say, after or right before Episode 6, We got the exact placement of the timeline on it, but you have Luke Skywalker in his Jedi outfit. You have Darth Vader. You have new characters that use the form Terras Kasi in order to fight. And you could also play as Mara Jade, which is cool too. You get to play as a Tusken Raider. You get to play as Boba Fett, Han Solo. The roster in this game is good. The concept of this is good. The execution is trash. Absolute garbage. This is, like I said, this is the main reason why Star Wars has never gone back to the fighting game genre, and probably should never do so ever again. Granted, we've had Star Wars movie duels, of course, on PC, that mod that kind of works and plays kind of like Mortal Kombat, but as far as official is concerned, unless you could get the right minds behind it, never do a Star Wars fighting game because of that. Literally.
You were the chosen one! It was said that you would destroy the Sith, not join them!
That does it for all the PlayStation 1 Star Wars games. As far as we got 6 Star Wars games on the PS1 that are added to the tier list. But now, let's go to the PlayStation 2. Of course, many of us, myself included, grew up playing a lot of PlayStation 2 games, especially big Star Wars games. If you didn't own an Xbox back in the day, chances are you owned a PlayStation 2. And there was plenty of stuff to play on multiple consoles, but on PlayStation 2 especially. So let's start it off with a big one. Let's go to Star Wars Battlefront, the original Star Wars Battlefront. This game is awesome. I think it still holds up pretty darn well. Granted, it's sequels and it's like, descendants, if you want to call it that. The games that came afterwards that bear the same name were better in various different ways, but there is a nice charm to Star Wars Battlefront, the original from 2004, I believe. It was 2003, 2004. Where there's like a nice charm to it. Like, it's like pure like third person or first person action with like, conquest game modes. A lot of the original stuff that was established for most of the Battlefront games starts off here, which is nice. It felt good to play. It still feels good to play as far as I'm concerned, both on PlayStation 2 and on PC. You get to play as both a Galactic Civil War or the Clone Wars, multiple maps, different maps, I think, on different platforms as well. I think there's other stuff like Battlefront 2. I think Battlefront 2 had the more like content that was exclusive to different platforms, but with Battlefront 1, like, again, it just is solid. So it's not the best, it's not in the top 2, but definitely a nice solid B-tier level game for Star Wars on a PlayStation console. I still think it holds up pretty well. I like it. I enjoyed it. I used to play hours of that game back in the day.
A surprise, to be sure, but a welcome one.
Moving on from there, more PlayStation 2 games, okay? Let's do a kind of like an unorthodox one. Let's do one from like out of pocket, right? Let's go Super Bombad Racing, okay? So Super Bombad Racing, this game is weird. This is a weird Star Wars game because it's like Mario Kart, but with Star Wars characters, and Star Wars characters that are kind of pulled mostly from the prequel trilogy, specifically Episode 1, I want to say. Now, there are different characters in there. You get to play as Yoda, you get to play as like some of these other characters as well from throughout the first 2 prequels, and I think you also get to unlock Darth Vader as well. And it's fine as far as racing is concerned. It's not really pod racing per se. It's more Mario Kart, but just replaced with Star Wars characters. Now, for me personally, I think it's okay. I don't think it's great. I think that it has a charm, and you probably might not spend more than like an hour or 2 with it, unless you're really a diehard player. If I had to really place this on the tier list, I'm going to say that this is probably going to be D tier. Now, this is not D tier where it's like, again, it's not trash, but it's not as good as some of these other games on the tier list. And the main reason being is because if it was more geared towards pod racing, and it was a little bit much more meat on the bone as far as like the amount of content that's there and stuff you can unlock or like other like, bonus goodies you could find, I feel like this would probably be a little bit higher. But if I had a choice between playing this and Mario Kart, I'm going to go play Mario Kart because by design, Mario Kart is so much better than this. This is like a lighter version of Mario Kart with Star Wars characters, and it could have honestly been better. But again, that's just me when it comes to racing games for Star Wars. But let me know some of your thoughts about that down below in the comments section. Do you agree or disagree with me? Do you agree or disagree with the tier list so far? This is the ultimate Star Wars tier list, okay, for PlayStation consoles, okay? But let's move on. Let's go to another PlayStation game. Let's go to another one. Speaking of prequels, let's go to the Clone Wars, okay? Now, I've reviewed this game also on the channel. Again, I have a lot of videos based on many of these games that you guys could go check out, and also reviews and stuff that you guys could check out. So, the first Clone Wars game, this came out right before, I think it was right before or right around the time Episode 2 Attack of the Clones came out. This is the first official Clone Wars video game for Star Wars. And I want to be honest with you, it's pretty mid. I would say damn near D tier, okay? The reason why it's D tier, in my video review that I talked about this, the controls could be a little bit janky, okay? The hit detection and the bugs would be a real problem. I think it's weird that most of the time you're in vehicles. you're not even on foot most of the time. Like, there are sections where you do go on foot and you get to play as Mace Windu. You get to play as, Anakin Skywalker, and I believe also once Obi-Wan Kenobi. But, like, most of the time you're in vehicles. You're in, like, some sort of, like, tank. You're in some sort of, like, speeder or whatever else. You're not really on foot. It's not like how with the Battlefront games you get a nice blending of both. With this one, like, 2/3 of the game you're on a vehicle, and then, like, that last third is, like, random, like, multiple spots that you're on foot, and they're very short in comparison to, like, the actual vehicle sections. Even the final battle, you're in a vehicle, and it's just, like, at this point, I might as well not even play as one of the Jedi characters. I might as well just play some random trooper that's just kind of there, right? So I would have to say, because of all those problems, I have to put it in D tier. I don't think it's that great. It's not trash. It's not like Masters of Terrascasi trash, but it's still not as great as everything else.
I have a bad feeling about this.
Now, let's jump to a nice good one. Let's jump to a nice good one, right? How about, oh man, what am I feeling right now? Let's go with Racer Revenge, okay? And more like real pod racing, okay, as compared to Super Bombad racing. Now, I'm notorious for saying and being out here saying that I don't think that the pod racing games are all that good for Star Wars games. And the main reason being is because I don't think, with maybe the exception of the arcade game that you could go play in like real arcades, I think it was done by Sega or Bandai Namco, where they really capture like the full like speed and the fun of pod racing in comparison. I know a lot of people love Episode 1 Racer, a lot of people love Racer Revenge, but I still feel like they're not the best Star Wars games in general. However, in relation to this tier list, I'm going to put Racer Revenge in C tier, okay, right next to Jedi Power Battles and The Phantom Menace. The main reason being, again, all that prequel love right there, right? The main reason being is because I feel like on the PlayStation 2, it still feels good in comparison to other stuff that's on there to control your pod racer. I still feel like it does have a little bit more extra content over its predecessor, which was Episode 1 Racer, which was on the N64, which, by the way, also got ported over to modern consoles recently. But the thing is that with this one has a little bit more Episode 2 love, where it's like in the story, like the non-canon like story, it has it where Anakin goes back to Tatooine. He starts to participate in a lot of like these different like pod races and stuff. It's whatever, right? And there's other characters in there that you could control different types of pod racers too, which is cool. But as far as like in comparison to the rest of the actual tier list with other Star Wars games, I don't think it's as great, but it is kind of mid. And if you're someone that's big into pod racing, this is pretty much all you have on the PlayStation 2, let alone on most of the PlayStation consoles in general, because there haven't been a lot of pod racing games for Star Wars, which is a shame, because we need a really good one at some point. Maybe like sometime in the modern day, maybe for PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, we could get a good pod racing game. Who knows, right?
That is why you must help us.
Let's go to Star Wars Bounty Hunter. Now, I know a lot of people played this on the GameCube. Okay, I get it. But there was also on the PlayStation 2, and it's also a popular version on the PlayStation 2. So Star Wars Bounty Hunter, I think, is good in concept. It's really good in concept. I think it's also has a lot of problems with its controls. I think it's really janky in a lot of instances. But I enjoy the story of Jango Fett. This tells the complete story right before the release of Episode 2 on how Jango Fett was chosen as the template for the Clone Army, where he actually gets recruited by Count Dooku. He does all this different stuff to, I think it's kill or assassinate a Jedi like acolyte or some sort of like apprentice of Count Dooku or some associate of his. That's like a dark Jedi for the most part. She's not a Sith. And because of that mission, he gets chosen to be like the template for the Clone Army, which is pretty cool. You get to find bounties, you get to arrest them or destroy them, you get to roll around in a jetpack, you have all these different types of like creatures and stuff. It's pretty good overall. On this tier list, however, is it the best of the best or absolute trash? I will say because of its technical issues, I have to put it in C tier. I'm going to put it above Demolition, Rebel Assault, Super Bombad, and Clone Wars, because I feel like it controls and feels a little bit better than those games, but it still has a lot of problems to hold it back from the higher echelon of the tier list, right? Moving on from there, let's go to a big one, okay? Let's go to Lego Star Wars. Now, a lot of people love this game, okay? Lego Star Wars is a very special place in a lot of people's hearts, especially if you grew up with Star Wars on PlayStation 2, right? This game started off the entire Lego Star Wars franchise, was a big influence on many different types of like licensed games back in the day. Lego Star Wars is on multiple platforms too, which is great. And it's also, I think, some of the Lego Star Wars games are also on handhelds. But for PlayStation 2, this game was pretty darn good. I will have to say, this is a solid B tier game. And the main reason why I put it in B tier and not A tier, like what I'm pretty sure some people would put higher, The main reason being is because I still think also that some of the technical limitations of this game being the first Lego Star Wars game holds this back. Like, you get to play through episode 1, 2, and 3, which is pretty cool. I feel like it's fun to kind of like relive those and have like a cheeky type of like take and parody on the prequel trilogy, which is fine, which is cool. And you could go back to this game and enjoy it for what it is. But because it's that first game, there was a lot of things as far as quality of life, as far as freedom is concerned and control-wise, that you got in later games, which we'll probably discuss. But with this one, it holds it back because, again, it was the very first one. But it's still pretty darn good. So B tier, I find, is a really good spot for that one. Let's go to the first Starfighter. Now, the first Starfighter, I'm going to put in C tier, okay? The main reason why I put it in C tier is because I think that these games, the Starfighter games, are good for what they are. And again, in concept and premise, their setting. This one takes place, I think, after episode 1, as far as the first game is concerned, which I think is pretty good. But the controls and just the feel of them in comparison to other games like Rogue Squadron, I don't think is as good.
What does that got to do with anything?
I think that, you know, there's a weird HUD with this game and also Jedi Starfighter, I would have to say the same thing, that kind of holds it back from being better than like something like Rogue Squadron or Rogue Leader. But if you're a fan of the prequel games and you're a fan of like just space combat games, I feel like you could still enjoy it. But some of the technical limitations in comparison to its sequel, which we're going to discuss in a second, holds it back, and for me, landed on C tier. Now, Jedi Starfighter, I put up in B tier because I think it feels a little bit better to play. And most of it is the same. Like, again, just different like maps or different stages, different story. I think this one is set after episode 2, or around the time of episode 2, I want to say, because you get to play as like multiple characters, and you even get involved with Mace Windu and stuff, and that's pretty cool. But overall, for me, what puts it a little bit higher than its predecessor is how it feels a little bit better to play through. Like, things just feel nicer. Like, they feel right in comparison. Like, if you go back between the two games, you could probably notice the difference. But still, I find Jedi Starfighter to be a little bit better than its predecessor. So far, we have a pretty solid, meaty tier list of all these games. Not a lot in the S tier or A tier, but a lot in the B and the C tier. We got a little bit of trash, and we got the D tier that's getting populated. Let's go more PlayStation 2. What do we have left for PlayStation 2? Lego Star Wars 2. This one's going up in A tier, okay? This one is a definitely solid A tier game because it feels a little bit better than Lego Star Wars 2. Not much is different with it, but the fact that you're in the original trilogy era, you're getting a lot more unlockables in comparison to Lego Star Wars 1. It feels like things have been a little bit tweaked as far as the controls and the difficulty and the puzzles. Lego games are just chill games, but I feel like those little bullet points that I mentioned give it a little bit more of an edge over its predecessor as well. So, solid A tier game. Reason why it's not S tier is because I feel like the Lego Star Wars games got better later on. Like, there's so much more better Lego Star Wars games that come after this. And again, a product of its time, but still a really good one. So if you've never played Lego Star Wars 2 before, definitely play it because I think it's a really solid game. I think we only got a few more PlayStation 2 games because I know some other game. Oh, okay, here we go. Star Wars The Clone Wars Republic Heroes. This one I'm dropping in a straight up D tier.
I have a bad feeling about this.
The reason why I'm putting this in D tier is because I understand it's got co-op. I understand it's based on the Star Wars, the Star Wars Clone Wars animated series. This one was also on PlayStation 3, technically. I should have like waited on this, but it was also on PlayStation 2. The problem is, though, is that technical issues, hit detection problems, difficulty is not all that bad. It's just kind of like all over the place, especially if you're playing alone. If you're playing with a friend, it's a lot more easier. But still, I'm a real big stickler when it comes to technical problems, bugs, glitches, and just overall design issues that like impact the experience. And that's why it knocks it down to D tier for me. And plus also, I feel like a lot of people really did not care for this game as much as they probably should. I felt like if there was a little bit more time put into the quality of life stuff and ironing out all those technical problems, this game would probably feel a lot better to play through. That's just my opinion. Some people might feel differently, especially if you have an affinity for the Clone Wars animated series. So, what I always thought was funny, we never got a game for the Taranofsky Clone Wars animated series. That actually would have been kind of cool. So, I think there's one more PlayStation 2 game. There it is. There it is. Star Wars Battlefront 2. Now, you know where I'm going to put this one. But there's got to be a Y to it, right? This one's going up in S tier. Okay. Automatic S tier. This game still holds up very well. Fun to play, feels very good to control, has a bunch of content between the instant action, the galactic conquest, the campaign that has Tamora Morrison giving narration and also doing the voices of the clones, has a ton of maps, has a ton of different classes, hero characters to play with. This game still holds up so good today. You could play it today and have more fun than the newer Battlefront games. Straight up.
Impressive. Most impressive.
If you know, you know. If you don't know, go find out. Go check out this game. I've done a review for this game like I did with the first Battlefront. I actually put them in a pair together in one video. And I tell you, this game, Star Wars Battlefront 2, still holds up very, very well. It's still so much fun to play. You could play it with a friend in co-op. You could play online with other people on the Xbox, the original Xbox, I should say. And it just feels good. On the original Xbox version, I should mention, it has a little bit more extra content than the PS2 version. They have about 2 more maps, I believe it is, and 2 extra heroes, which is cool, you know, for what it is. Automatic S-tier game. Game still holds up super darn well. So I believe that's everything on PlayStation 2, because the only reason why I mentioned Clone Wars, Republic Heroes, and this one is because, again, I remembered it was on PS2, but that also was on PS3, so you can say the same thing about it on the PlayStation 3 version. But speaking of PlayStation 3, let's move on to PlayStation 3, or should we go to PSP? That's a good question. You know what? Let's go to PSP, because I feel like PSP is a little bit short, and there's more games to talk about on PlayStation 3, but let's talk about PSP. Star Wars Lethal Alliance. Now, Lethal Alliance, I've had time more recently to play through in full, and I have to say, like, the game itself and concept as well is pretty darn good. It has a very interesting and unique character, and also a unique timeline placement, even though it's a Legends game. This actually takes place around the same time that Star Wars Dark Forces happens, because your character, Rhianna, I think it's Rhianna. Again, I forgot her last name. But the Twi'lek that you're playing as, the hunter or the bounty hunter, you're working together with Kyle Katarn, which is pretty cool. What are you doing? You're trying to steal the Death Star plans for Episode 4, A New Hope, which is pretty cool. However, this being on the PSP, there's a lot of technical limitations. There's a lot of big issues, okay? A lot of big issues with the controls sometimes. And also because of the loading and the bugs and glitches that could pop up from time to time, it's on a handheld that plays pretty much kind of like a portable PS2 almost in some instances. It just, those things tend to hold it back. Now, if this game and this concept was given a much more home console budget and was actually given a lot more attention and love, I feel like it could probably be much higher in the tier list.
I have a bad feeling about this.
But for this one, the PSP game, okay, Star Wars Lethal Alliance, I'm going to put it in C tier. I'm going to put it right there nicely in C tier because, again, great concept, great character, or interesting character, I should say, great timeline placement, just great. Again, I already said great timelines, but all that other stuff, all that stuff is pretty good. However, technical problems, the fact that loading issues could be an issue, the controls, because it's on the PSP, could be a problem, and also because I feel like the some of the other issues that I mentioned as well could get in the way and impact the experience just overall. Makes this much more of a solid C tier game, along on par with some of the other ones that I've mentioned so far. So that's pretty interesting, but I wish that game was better, to be honest with you. That's one of the few Star Wars games made by Ubisoft, by the way, that you get from back in the day. Funny enough, Ubisoft is making Star Wars Outlaws now, which is coming in, like, hopefully in the next year or so. So let's move on. Let's go to other PSP games. Let's talk about Star Wars Battlefront Renegade Squadron. Now, the problem with the Star Wars Battlefront games on portable devices, on the PSP specifically, is that they were cool to have. The idea of playing, Battlefront on the go is awesome, but their execution is not that great because a lot of stuff has changed. Star Wars Battlefront 2 was on the PSP, and it's essentially the same exact game as Battlefront 2 on the PS2, with just minor changes to the controls. Because you're working with the PSP, you don't have, like, shoulder buttons, or as many shoulder buttons as that handheld does, or that controller does. So you have to work within those limits of that design, which is a little bit annoying. It's a little bit of a pain in the butt. But still, what did we get with this one? With Renegade Squadron, we got an original story that talks about more kind of like where Battlefront 2 was all about the 501st, the clone army that turned into the stormtroopers for the Empire. You get like this, like, Renegade Squadron, which was being directed by Han Solo for most of, like, the original Star Wars movies, all the way through, the Battle of Endor, which is pretty cool. However, does it play good? To be honest with you, I'm going to have to say not really. And if anything, it's not in the top 3. But is it trash? I don't think it's trash. If I had to pick out of these in comparison to everything else, I'm going to say that it's kind of either C or D tier. Because again, the controls I feel like ruin the experience, or at least get to the point where it can ruin the experience. The story is interesting and it's different compared to the previous game because prior to this one, Battlefront 2 came out, which is cool. And like if you got like the Empire's like version, then you want to get the Rebellion version of stuff, which would be dope. But still, there's a lot of content to it. Also introduced the idea of customizable loadouts for Star Wars Battlefront, which is what you got later on as well in other Battlefront games. And for that, I'll give it C tier. For that alone, I'll give it C tier because it's doing a lot of things that are different, and it's also on a different platform, but it's still just the problems with the controls and some of the other technical limitations I feel like hold it back.
What kind of nonsense is this?
Speaking of more Battlefront, on the PSP, let's talk about Elite Squadron. This one gets below this. This one's a D tier game.
What?
For a couple reasons. Number one, the story in this game is whack. I don't care too much about the story going on with the two characters that it follows. It really is disappointing because it does utilize the ground to space combat like idea. Like at least you know what Star Wars Battlefront 3 was going to use. But unfortunately, it doesn't do it very well because of the limitations of the PSP. And because there are other things that just weren't really included from previous Battlefront games, that this one's just kind of just there. And a lot of people know of it. Not many people remember playing it as much, or not really many people care to go back to it. You know, if anything, if I was a betting man, a lot more people would go back to Renegade Squadron than they would for Elite Squadron, which is a shame because you look at that cover art and it looks awesome. It's very reminiscent of the previous Battlefront games, but everything else about it is just kind of mediocre.
I don't believe that. And you're sounding like a separatist.
Which is a shame, because you never want to see a mediocre Star Wars game. You never want to see a trash Star Wars game. And luckily, this one's not trash, because at least it was doing an effort. You know what I'm saying? Much better than Masters of Terrascasi. But still, I don't think it was the best one on the PSP. I still feel like if I had to choose the best Star Wars game on the PSP, besides Battlefront 2, I would say Lethal Alliance, because it's original in comparison to the other games. So that takes care of all the PSP games. Now, we get to PlayStation 3, people. Now we're getting into some serious territory, okay? So first one, we're gonna just kick the door open right off that. Star Wars The Force Unleashed. Now, I've reviewed this game. I have a video review up on the channel now. You can check out for more details about it after this video, by the way. And I have to say, this is if I had to choose, this game holds up. So this one's definitely up here. It's not any of these tiers. I'm gonna give it a nice solid A tier. And the reason why I'm going to give it A tier, because I know it does have some technical issues. It does have some collision detection issues here and there, right? But the character of Starkiller Galen Merrick is awesome. The story is awesome. The premise of it as far as going ham with the Force powers is amazing. The customization is pretty decent, even though it's not deep. The fact that you get various different Star Wars legacy characters in here in this story is pretty cool. And yeah, just everything about it was fun.
Another happy landing.
Definitely a solid A tier. I definitely put it up there with Lego Star Wars 2. A lot of people prefer this game than its sequel, which, speaking of which, Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2, this one's getting all the way knocked down to about a D tier, okay? The reason why Force Unleashed 2 is getting knocked down to D tier is because of a couple reasons. Number one, super short in comparison to the Force Unleashed 1. Number two, massively more technical issues and bugs and glitches compared to its predecessor. Number three, this game was a rushed development. This game was so rushed in comparison to the first game that we were getting a lot of stuff that was supposed to set up The Force Unleashed 3 that never happened because shortly after this game, Lucasfilm was bought out by Disney and all the projects got canceled. And everything about this feels like there's a bunch of promises in this game, or at least set up for certain stuff that just is not followed through with. And again, very short game in comparison to its predecessor. It's like this game you can knock out in like 3 hours, you know, if anything, maybe 4 if you're trying to get everything on there. And if you speed through it, you could probably be a lot less than that, which is a shame because I like Galen Merrick. I love Sam Witwer as Starkiller. I wish that his character could come back in canon. This again, Force Unleashed 1 and 2 are non-canon. They're Legends material, but still, people love Starkiller so much. It's just, this game sucked, but his first game was pretty darn awesome, just in general. That's just my opinion. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments section. Let's go now to more PlayStation 3. Let's go to LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga. Now, a lot of people love this game, and I totally understand why, because it's pretty much the first 2 LEGO Star Wars games put together with more stuff on top of it. You want to know where this goes? Solid A tier.
A surprise, to be sure, but a welcome one.
This is a solid A tier Star Wars game because of the sheer amount of content that's in there, and it feels good to play too. You got a bunch of unlockables. You got a bunch of different challenges across all 6 original Star Wars saga movies, or Star Wars, like, you know, eras, you could say. And just in general, it's just fun. Again, Lego games are usually fun, but this one is a very good one. A lot of people really love this game. Some people would say it's S tier, but I disagree with it because I think that the Lego Star Wars games, some of the later ones, are much better than even this one. But it's my personal opinion. But if I had to choose where to place this, I would say solid A tier because of the amount of content and how fun it is to play overall. So if you're a big fan of the complete saga, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Let's move on now. More PlayStation 3. Let's go to Lego Star Wars The Force Awakens. Now, this is where things get a little bit meh because I don't think this game is as good as the complete saga, but it's definitely better than Lego Star Wars 1, I would say. And the thing is that if I had to really choose where to place this, I would say it's B tier.
What?
Even though I'm not a fan of the sequel trilogy. And I know a lot of people, just on principle alone, they would say that because this is The Force Awakens, this gets knocked down the list. And I disagree with that. And the main reason why I disagree with this is because the game itself, I still think is pretty solid. It's got voice acting. It's got, different challenges and such. It has some things going for it as far as a Lego Star Wars game is concerned. And that's really what we care about in the end. We care more about it being a fun game, a well-designed game, a thoughtful game, and in general, just fun to go back to. You could go back to that game and pretty much enjoy it. I don't think you can enjoy it as much as the complete saga, but still, I find that B tier is fair to put that game in. Now, moving on from there, right? Let's go to Lego Star Wars 3, The Clone Wars. This is where also things start to get a little bit weird because I find that this one, you could also say the same thing. I'm going to put this in B tier as well. This is another one that has voice acting. This takes place during the Clone Wars. A lot of unlockables, a lot of different things that are a little bit different in comparison to the previous Lego Star Wars games. And I find that this one could also be fun. I just don't enjoy it as much personally because I think that the other Lego Star Wars games are so much better. So Lego Star Wars 3, if you love the Clone Wars, that's your Lego Star Wars game. Like, that one is like right up your alley, especially if you like the Clone Wars animated stuff. But still, in comparison to the other games higher up on this list, not as good, but still fun nonetheless. Now we get to PlayStation 4. Now we're cooking, okay? Now we are officially cooking, okay? So, let's go with, out of all these here, let's go with this first EA Star Wars Battlefront. Now, this one is going to be C tier, okay? Now, I get it. Lego Star Wars... Not Lego Star Wars. Star Wars Battlefront, was it by EA for the PlayStation 4, has some of the best visuals of a Star Wars game, period. Like, straight up. Like, the photorealism of everything in this game is fantastic. Here's the problem, though.
I have a bad feeling about this.
Number one, very big lack of content. There's not a lot to do in the first Star Wars Battlefront by EA. You have these little like diorama trophies, but it takes forever to earn some of these things, which is annoying. You can play online, you probably still can, but it's not that fun in comparison to the other games. And on top of that too, I don't think this one had the Clone Wars era. If I remember, like that was like a big deal for a lot of people, I think, at some point. It does have DLC. I remember it has like extra DLC. I think it was Bespin, and I think also the Death Star was some DLC. Like it had like 2 or 3 DLC packs. Oh no, Jabba's Palace. That was the other DLC that came with this game. But not a lot of content beyond that. It's not as fun as some of the other Star Wars games. So I say C tier just on those visuals alone because they just look so darn good. Like it's almost photorealistic. If you remember those trailers from back in the day, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So moving on from there, let's go with Star Wars Squadrons because this is PlayStation 4. So Star Wars Squadrons, some people say that it might be one of the best flight games for Star Wars. I disagree with that because I know a lot of people have nostalgia for the TIE Fighter series, the X-Wing series, X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, whatever. That's fine. This game takes a lot of inspiration from that. I think it's also cool that the visuals of this game looks pretty good, and the controls are pretty interesting and pretty easy to get into. But personally, for me,
Happy beats here, buddy. Come on.
I don't think this game is as fun in comparison to Star Wars Rogue Squadron or any of the Rogue Squadron games when it comes to flight, base, or space combat with starfighters. I think that the visuals are great. I think that the controls are interesting. You can play this game in VR, which is cool, but not as good as Rogue Squadron. So if I had to put this on the tier list here, I'm going to go with B tier. I think B tier is fair. You got great visuals, you got great controls, you have an original story, which I think is kind of whack, but some people seem to like it. I just don't think it's all that great. You get some customization too, which is cool. What was a damn shame about Star Wars Squadrons is that EA did not support it for a very long time. We could have had like extra ships, like downloadable ships from like the expanded universe. We could have gotten other stuff from like the sequel trilogy. We could have gotten other stuff from like the Clone Wars maybe. That would have been sick.
You were the chosen one!
But EA decided just to drop it like a bad habit, which is a damn shame. For real. They could have supported that game so much more. You know what I'm saying? Let me know if you wanted to see a specific ship in Star Wars Squadrons down below in the comment section, because that game I felt like deserved a little bit better. But I digress. To Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. Now we're really cooking, okay? This game, if I had to choose where this game is going to go, because it's not going down here, okay? Jedi Fallen Order is definitely going, if I had to pick, it's going in a solid A tier.
What?
And here's why. Out of all the Jedi games done by Respawn Entertainment, I find that Jedi Fallen Order has the better story, okay? However, this game, especially on the PlayStation 4 going into PlayStation 5, had a lot of technical problems with different types. I think it was like the behavior of the enemies, as well as also the delay with some of your inputs on the controls. Like for some odd reason, this happens with a lot of Soulsborne games. There seems to be like certain instances, whether before or after updates, where you'll like be locked into an action and you can't actually do another action afterwards until that previous one is done. So if you're doing an attack and you hit an input for an attack on accident, you're going to do that full attack and you can't cancel out of it, which is annoying. And it's also the primary cause why so many people end up getting killed in some of the big battles in that game, especially the tougher ones.
I don't believe that. And you're sounding like a separatist.
But I think this game is phenomenal. I think the game is really solid. Great character with Cal Kestis. Cameron Monaghan is awesome. Marin is awesome. Sierra Junda, I think, is also awesome. And also the second sister in this game. Fantastic with this story. This game is awesome with story, atmosphere, setting up a good placement in the Star Wars timeline. This game is dope. But had it not been for those technical issues that I mentioned, this game would be an S tier. But because of that happening when it came out originally at first, and even over time for some people, I feel like A tier is the right spot to put that game in. It's still good. It's still great. I could highly recommend Jedi Fallen Order. But as far as the purpose of this tier list, that's where it's going to go, right? So now, let's also talk about Star Wars Battlefront 2. Now, this is the Celebration Edition, so we're talking all the content, okay? So it could be Star Wars Battlefront 2 Vanilla or Star Wars Battlefront 2 Celebration Edition, whatever. Battlefront 2 by EA. This game is going to be in solid A tier as well, okay? The reason why this is getting in solid A tier is because of a couple reasons. Number one, rocky launch. Terrible, terrible launch with the loot box stuff. But that got changed over time, so I won't be too harsh on it. As the game is now, like if you go online, right, and you go download this game, you go buy it in a store, whatever, can you still enjoy it? Yes. You can hop online, play with a bunch of people, and enjoy it for what it is. There's a lot of cheaters. There's a lot of nonsense. There's a lot of people on there that have been playing this since day one and are still playing only this. So you'll have to deal with that. But this game looks gorgeous. Some of the best visuals and graphics for a Star Wars game, hands down. Much more content than its predecessor. A ridiculous amount more content. More eras. So you got the Clone Wars, you got the Galactic Civil War, and you got the Rise Against the First Order. You got all that stuff. The only thing that this game does not have, which is, again, oh my god, a big shame.
I have a bad feeling about this.
And I blame EA for this. No support for it after like a certain amount of time. So after all the DLC we got from the Celebration Edition, that was it. So that means all that stuff from The Mandalorian, from Ahsoka, the Clone Wars, none of that is featured into this game as DLC. There's no even like expanded universe stuff. It's like, come on, EA. This could have printed money for you. Like straight up could have printed money. You could have had stuff from Dark Empire, from Heir to the Empire. You could have had stuff from like, the Yuzan Vong or something, right? Even Shadows of the Empire. That's like almost original trilogy. You could have had so many things for DLC that people would have paid hand over fist money for, and they just decided to stop supporting it. It was like, oh my god.
This is outrageous. It's unfair.
You want to talk about you want to talk about a fumble. Like, this was a bad fumble, and it's so good at some point, man. Regardless, though, personal feelings aside, that game is going into A tier because I still think there's something there for people. And I still think that there's enough people right now that play this on PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5. They probably play it on PC as well with all the mods and stuff and have a great time with it. So that's just my opinion. Now, we got 2 more games left on the ultimate tier list for PlayStation Star Wars games, okay? Lego Star Wars the Skywalker Saga. This game is S tier. This is the S tier Lego Star Wars game for me. The reason being is because there is so much content. You have the freedom to go to all these different planets and explore around, to find all these unlockables. You got a story mode that's based on all 9 Star Wars films, from Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, through The Rise of Skywalker, plus DLC involving The Mandalorian, The Clone Wars, was it Rogue One and Andor. Like, there's so much content with this game. This game is so packed with so much content. I'm telling you right now, you're not going to be done with it by the 30 or 40 hour mark. Just if you want to get everything 100% it, you're going to be playing for so long.
Impressive. Most impressive.
Because there's so many things to do in this game, and also because it's a Lego game, it's all about the collectathon, and it's fun. There's voice acting, there's cheeky humor in it, there's a fun time going through all the original Star Wars movies. It's a lot of great stuff in this game. This game is an S tier Lego Star Wars game. Some people don't like it for whatever reason, but I'm telling you, having played all these different games, this game is an S tier game, straight up.
A surprise, to be sure, but a welcome one.
Now, final Star Wars game. Star Wars Jedi Survivor, okay? This game came out recently. I also have another review of that. I had a review of Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga, but Jedi Survivor, I have a video review on the channel you could check out later. Where does this go? Where's the final Star Wars game rank on our ultimate tier list here for PlayStation game?
I've got a bad feeling about this.
I've got a bad feeling about this, sir.
Oh, I have a bad feeling about this.
This game is big. It has a lot of content, an interesting story, has awesome gameplay where you get to explore all these different planets, you know, and like do different types of like quests and stuff, which is awesome. We get a lot of great characters with Cal Kestis, Marin, Sierra Junda. We get all the, the High Republic stuff. If you're into the High Republic, I'm not into the High Republic, but still, like, in complementary to like all the other stuff with this game. This game is solid. This game has a lot of good stuff going for it. Had a little bit of a rocky launch because some people had some technical issues, but in my experience playing it from day one, I didn't have a lot of big problems. And I have to say, this is another S tier game, straight up. This is an S tier Star Wars game. A little bit better than its predecessor, even though I think its predecessor has the better story. This game has the better gameplay because it has so much content in it. It has a lot of different places you could go to, a lot of different things you can do, a lot of customization options, a little bit more than Jedi Fallen Order, which I think is pretty cool. So, and yeah, a lot of potential overall. They didn't really do DLC for Jedi Survivor, which is a shame because they could have added like other little stuff to do. But still, I think it was a pretty darn good game overall. So,
another happy landing.
There you go. This is the ultimate Star Wars game tier list for PlayStation platforms. As someone that is more than qualified to talk about all this, trust me, this right here are the games that you got to pay attention to, the games you got to play, the games you got to avoid or at least poke fun at in some way. S tier, we have Star Wars Battlefront 2 in 2005 from Pandemic, Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga, and Star Wars Jedi Survivor from Respawn Entertainment. All three fantastic must-play Star Wars games, hands down. A tier, we have Lego Star Wars 2, the original trilogy, Star Wars The Force Unleashed, Lego Star Wars The Complete Saga, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, and EA Star Wars Battlefront 2. A tier. All those games, little bit flaws here and there, but still solid games for you to play. They're fantastic. You could have a great time in every single one of those games. B tier, we're going a little bit down further on the list. We got Star Wars Dark Forces on PlayStation 1. We got the original Star Wars Battlefront from Pandemic. We got Lego Star Wars, the video game, the original game. Star Wars Jedi Starfighter, Lego Star Wars The Force Awakens, Lego Star Wars 3, The Clone Wars, and Star Wars Squadrons, all in B tier. These games, you can still have a fun time with it. They have some flaws. They're a little bit either outdated, or they have some issues with them that aren't as good as some of the previous games that are higher up on the tier list, but still Star Wars games I feel like you could get something out of overall in general. Now in C tier, we have Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace, Star Wars Episode 1 Jedi Power Battles, Star Wars Racer Revenge, Star Wars Bounty Hunter, Star Wars Starfighter, Star Wars Lethal Alliance, Star Wars Renegade Squadron, and EA Star Wars Battlefront 1. On C tier, these games have a lot more flaws. They have a lot more issues here and there that you have to deal with that at least impact your experience. But there's still games that if you grew up playing them, you'll still probably have a lot of nostalgia for them. You can probably check them out if you're a big Star Wars fan and probably get something out of them and at least still have a fun time in some way, especially with some of the more original ones. The ones that I can recommend, Star Wars Lethal Alliance, Star Wars Bounty Hunter, and of course Jedi Power Battles for a lot of people. I know a lot of people love that game, but It has a lot of flaws and stuff that I criticized in my review, but still, that's at least what it is for C tier. Now in D tier, we're getting really low on the list here. We got Star Wars Demolition, Star Wars Rebel Assault 2, Star Wars Super Bombad Racing, Star Wars The Clone Wars, Star Wars The Clone Wars Republic Heroes, Star Wars Elite Squadron, and Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2. These games have a lot of problems in D tier. They have a lot of issues, whether it's technical, control-wise, story-wise. They're just not fun to play. Maybe they're short, but they're at least still Star Wars games you could check out and see what they're all about. But trust me, they are not as good as any of the previous ones that are higher up on the tier list.
I don't believe that. And you're sounding like a separatist.
And then finally, the one trash Star Wars game on the PlayStation platforms, Star Wars Masters of Terrascasi. This game is utter trash. It's garbage. You should not play this. Don't even think about it. Don't even look at it, son. Like, seriously, don't even look at the game. Like, it's embarrassing. Okay, this game is embarrassing. This is the sole reason why we don't have any more Star Wars fighting games, is because of Masters of Terrascasi. It was that bad on the PlayStation 1, and since then, we've had no official Star Wars fighting games.
It was said that you would destroy the Sith, not join them!
That should be enough for you to understand why it's so bad and why you should not play it. So anyway, there you go. That is my Star Wars tier list, my ultimate Star Wars tier list for Star Wars games on PlayStation platforms, spanning from PlayStation 1 all the way through PlayStation 5. Let me know some of your thoughts about the tier list in the comment section down below. Which games would you place higher? Which games would you place lower? Are some of your favorite games high up on the tier list or low on the tier list? Talk to me about all that stuff down below in the comment section. Of course, make sure you guys leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and go check out all the reviews and all the videos that I have about every single one of these Star Wars games. I've at least talked about every single one of these Star Wars games at some point or another if I don't have video reviews of them, but still, there's videos on the channel. It's all in the Star Wars playlist. Hopefully you guys enjoy that stuff. Hopefully you guys get a kick out of it, and be on the lookout soon. Maybe I'll do one for some of the other platforms, because again, we still got Xbox to talk about. We still got Nintendo platforms to talk about, which is going to be huge. It's going to be freaking huge. I freaking dread when I got to do that one, but maybe I'll do the Xbox tier list next at some point. Let me know your thoughts about that in the comments down below, and I will talk to you guys again very soon.